It's a famous piece of Star Wars lore that Darth Vader didn't go back to Tatooine for very specific reasons. In A New Hope, Vader captured the Tantive 4 right above Anakin Skywalker's homeworld of Tatooine, the same world on which both his son and his oldest enemy Obi-Wan Kenobi were currently hiding away. Vader called out that the escape pods which were launched from the ship definitely contained the plans to the Death Star, and yet, Vader only sent a patrol of stormtroopers to recover it. This was despite what we know he did just hours earlier in the events of Rogue One. He tore his way through the rebels, leaving Scarif just to secure the Emperor's plans. But once the rebel scum reached Tatooine, they unwillingly launched it into the place where Vader himself feared to go. The same place where Obi-Wan knew to hide Luke away and himself for 2 decades. This was a stroke of genius on part of Master Kenobi and Grandmaster Yoda, as they knew of Anakin's trauma and memories, where he grew from a slave to a Dark Lord of the Sith. But was there a deeper reason why Vader refused to visit Tatooine? One that not even Obi-Wan Kenobi knew about? We believe that there absolutely is. A place on the Lars homestead, in fact. So join us today as we open a holocron and explore the biggest attributor to the safety of Luke Skywalker, his own grandmother. Interestingly enough, as long as Obi-Wan spent time on Tatooine, he never did know the full story of all that had occurred there. He was present when Qui-Gon liberated Anakin from slavery. We also know that he was aware of Shmi's death, as Anakin had very briefly divulged that information to him following the events of Attack of the Clone. However, Kenobi himself mentions that he knows very little. Anakin never went into detail about how his mother died, nor what happened following. In fact, it was about a year into Obi-Wan's exile before he learned of Anakin's slaughter of the Tusken Raiders. After that, he was able to put together the pieces of how the whole thing had occurred. This makes us theorize that it wasn't necessarily Obi-Wan's conscious choice to hide himself and Luke on this world, but rather, it was the will of the Force guiding the Jedi Master. Anakin's slaughter of the Tuskens and the burial of his mother sent waves through the Force. For all intents and purposes, this was the birth of Darth Vader, or at least this was the spark of darkness which would grow into Vader. Many believe that Mustafar was the birth of Darth Vader, but we would say that it was truly on Tatooine where it all began. This makes his complex psyche even more fascinating, as a Sith Lord actually lives in the world of Mustafar in a castle, one which overlooks the beach from which he was horribly disfigured. On this world, the Dark Lord meditates on his rage and grows stronger in the dark side. He remembers his loss to Kenobi and everything that occurred with Padme. These were the greatest sources of Anakin's pain, the greatest sources of Vader's pain. But the irony is that he is completely incapable of going anywhere near Tatooine. This is the true greatest source of his agony and where he buried away his true sorrow. While Mustafar was a world rich with Vader's trauma, Tatooine was rich with Anakin's trauma. So much of Anakin was in this planet that it risked destabilizing Vader. And all of this led back to his mother, Shmi. There were only a few places in Anakin's life where he experienced real love. Before Padme, the only person he loved was his mother, Shmi. She gave up everything for him, including Anakin himself, when the time was ready for him to go free and become a Jedi. When she was captured, tortured, and murdered by the Tuskens, it made Anakin snap for the first time. From that point forward, he carried a deep fear of losing those that he loved and not being powerful enough to save them. That one moment was the catalyst for Vader's rise, an essential birth within Anakin. It was Padme herself who Darth Vader had the most connection with. This was why he was able to visit Padme's grave and go to Naboo without any problem. This is also why we believe that Padme could not have turned Anakin back to the light side if she was alive. It was because of her that Vader was present in the first place. Not that it was in any way her fault, of course, just that Anakin's fear of her death and desire to prevent what happened to his mother from happening again caused him to tread down the path of the dark side. The first time Anakin ever declared that he would be the most powerful Jedi ever was right after his mother's death. In that moment, he was very much still Anakin, just in terrible pain. So much pain that Yoda sensed it from across the galaxy. He also sensed no events of the Acolyte, by the way. Anyway, there was a time when Darth Vader did actually return and would go back to Tatooine, many years after his son left. In Darth Vader 2020 #1, in the canon comics which take place right after the Duel of Cloud City, Vader has only Luke on his agenda and his mind. He was impressed at Luke's hidden potential. But Vader was disgusted with how weak his son was. He believed originally that Obi-Wan had trained Luke since childhood, as the Jedi had done with all the others. But after seeing Luke's complete lack of understanding of the Force, the loose grip on his emotions, his feeble skill with the lightsaber, Vader quickly understood that Obi-Wan had only given him a crash course of Jedi training. Luke had spent his life being raised in a loving home, the Lars home. Vader was so enraged. He blamed Owen for making his son weak. He desired to put aside his fear of Tatooine, to go and to seek revenge on the Lars homestead. Not only this though, but Vader desperately needed to retrace his steps of what had happened after Mustafar. He knew that Palpatine had lied about Padme's death, and that both she and his child had survived at least a while longer. And to make it worse, Kenobi had been responsible. Darth Vader's resolve destroyed his fear, and he traveled to Tatooine, taking a contingent of Imperial intelligence officers, death troopers, and forensics droids with him. Vader landed down on the sandy world for the first time in 20 years, only to find a burned, empty hovel. And now, with no one to kill, every bit of Vader's mental defenses dissolved like paper in water. He was suddenly reminded of every reason he never came to Tatooine. The memories of Anakin. Vader was accosted by the memories of Skywalker, but not really from his childhood, but rather his teenage years. The Lars homestead reminded him of the days leading up to finding his mother, when he returned her body and then lay her where she would never move again. He wasn't just reminded of Shmi, but also Padme, who had tried to comfort him during that time. Among the onslaught of memories, he saw Luke falling down the shaft of Cloud City. Luke then became Shmi falling, and Shmi became Padme. Overwhelmed with feelings of loss and pain that he could not fight, Vader tore himself out of the Lars damaged homestead and ignited his lightsaber in a fury, but had absolutely nothing to fight. Nothing but his own memories. Vader had come to punish someone, anyone, but there was no one left. This was when the forensics droid identified 2 cubed objects buried in the sand. Vader looked down to see 2 stone rectangles in the sand below him. Staring at them intently, Vader knew exactly what they were. The gravestones of Klieg Lars and Shmi Skywalker. The droid then identified both as such, remarking that they were buried likely by Owen, who never wanted them to be rediscovered. Vader decided to finish the job in that moment. Reaching out with the Force, he caused the sand to funnel in, completely burying both headstones forever. Luckily for the Dark Lord, raiders attacked in that moment, and he was able to unleash his tempestuous rage, one that had been swirling inside of him during the entire experience, and the raiders never stood a chance. They definitely knocked on the wrong door that day, and so, that was the reason why Vader avoided Tatooine like the plague, his mother. The grave of Shmi was nothing but pure pain, the pain that belonged to Anakin Skywalker. The pain that Vader tried to crush, to hide in the dust. This was not where he found power, looking upon his greatest failure of Mustafar. This is where he found his own weakness. Tatooine was proof that Anakin Skywalker was always there, and that Darth Vader was afraid of that fact. I'm definitely glad that we got some comic material exploring Vader's journey back to Tatooine, and if you would like to read that for yourself, be sure to check out the canon Darth Vader run that started in 2020. As of recording this video, the series is still ongoing and is approaching 50 issues. But thank you as always for joining us in today's Holocron reading, and we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. As always, may the Force be with you.